I am Anish Khadiya, the Chief Business Officer of Itilite, and your host for today. Itilite is a travel booking, expense reimbursement, and payments platform. Our focus is on simplifying travel for healthcare providers as well as the organizations. We work with several health systems and staffing agencies to make travel easy, enjoyable, and safe for the providers. In our webinar today, we look under the hood of travel nursing with an eminent voice from the industry. Before I get started, let me share some context about the state of the healthcare industry and travel nursing in particular. Once the healthcare systems emerged from the COVID pandemic and entered the new normal, many found that their staffing issues had only gotten worse. Healthcare professionals and nurses in particular experienced increased burnout from the prolonged healthcare crisis. Many chose to switch roles or leave the profession altogether. In 2023, most health systems sought to prioritize workforce stability. This has continued into 2024 with healthcare systems putting in increased effort to recruit and retain permanent nurses. However, talent shortages and turnover rates continue to persist, and hiring travel nurses remains a key strategy to fill open positions. This is more pronounced for hard-to-fill roles such as registered nurses, nurse practitioners, physical therapists, and mental health professionals. In a tight talent market like today, hiring travel nurses can widen a health system's talent pool, providing more patient coverage and helping reduce burnout. Facility administrators definitely understand that it may be easier to work with staffing agencies and MSPs to shuttle in qualified experienced nurses, rather than endure the long and costly cycle for recruiting, onboarding, and training perm nurses. The expected job growth for RNs is 6% higher than average. But the supply of travel nursing jobs cannot be boiled down to one specific number. It depends on several factors such as facility needs, geographic location, the specific role, and so on. This brings us to an important question for recruiters at healthcare systems or for RNs looking to explore travel nursing. How do you identify the right fit in a hire? What type of opportunities align with your qualifications and aspirations? To answer this and more pertinent questions, I am thrilled to welcome one of the true veterans of the nursing profession. With 28 years of experience as a registered nurse and a background that spans from bedside care to corporate leadership, please welcome Peter Mecouch, Chief Clinical and Compliance Officer at General Healthcare Resources. Peter, it's a pleasure to have you at the Healthcare Honchos. Can you start off with telling us a little bit about you and your journey till now?
Sure. Thank you, Anish. I became a nurse in 1993, so I'm actually at 31 years of nursing. I did about 15 years of clinical nursing, direct patient care. My areas of specialty were nephrology nursing and critical care. I both worked as an employed staff nurse and for a period of time worked as an agency staffing nurse. I did local agency staffing, not travel agency, in the greater Philadelphia market. Moved into nursing leadership and nursing management, eventually into hospital administration, and have made my way to General Healthcare Resources in the last 4 years. Moving into the staffing industry was a new role for me, not something that I would have ever imagined, even as soon as 5 years ago. Would I imagine that I'm sitting here talking to you and our listeners, being in charge of clinical and compliance for GHR healthcare. I have always loved the career. I went to nursing school right out of high school, so that made me a bit of a unicorn. and knew when I was a sophomore in high school that nursing school was what I wanted to pursue. I do come from a family of nurses. My mom, my mom's sister, and my mom's mother were all nurses, so I consider myself a third generation nurse within that side of the family. Um, and uh, you know, knew well ahead of time before nursing school what I was getting into, because my mother and my aunt were more than happy to tell me what nursing was going to be like when I got there. So
Well, then I should correct myself. You have not just 31 years of nursing experience behind you. You have 3 generations of nursing experience behind you,
yep, yep,
right? Which brings
yep.
me to my first question. You've had a long and distinguished career in nursing. How have you seen the profile of a nurse evolve over this period?
So I would the profile of a nurse and the profile of the profession. I think that they have symbiotically grown together. I think nursing as a profession, we have seen a lot more nurses with advanced degrees. Um, in the last 20 years, we have seen the push to see more baccalaureate prepared nurses coming out of school, working directly at the bedside. In my own experience, I have seen nurses working still at the bedside with masters and PhDs or doctorate in nursing practice degrees. So I think that one, the profession has pushed itself to become more strongly educated and tie that education to accolades that go back to collegiate degrees and advanced collegiate degrees. I think that the industry or the profile of a nurse has become as much technology and uh, forward use of technology in care of patients as it has always been the simple touch, of a human being providing care to an individual who's at their worst point in their life. I think that education, professionalism that ties back to that advanced education, and the advanced learning that nurses are doing. I also think that nurses are focusing a lot on certifications. They're focusing on certifications and expressing their expertise in their different areas of nursing through those certifications. Whether that's a certification in emergency room nursing or a certification in critical care nursing. I think nurses are tying back their clinical expertise and putting a capstone on that expertise by getting those non-academic certifications, but nonetheless rigorous certifications with X amount of hours worked in that area, comprehensive exams that tie back to that certification, and then ongoing education with continuing education requirements or repeating that examination that ties back to their certifications. Thirdly, I would say that there's been a lot of focus on the nursing realm and advanced practice. A lot of nurses are coming into the field. They're spending some time at the bedside, and then they're going back to school to become nurse practitioners or certified registered nurse anesthetists. And they're entering the world of licensed providers. They are writing prescriptions. They're seeing patients. They're in the 50 states. Don't quote me exactly, but I know that there's probably about 25 or more states that allow nurse practitioners to hang their own shingle out and practice. The other states are taking note of that. Some states are, doing it specific to certain areas of nursing practice, and others are loosening the amount of partnership that NPs need to have and oversight that they would need to have with, a physician provider, which back at the original outset of nurse practitioners, you could not practice without a physician provider, being your exact, your direct cohort in the practice that you were in. So I think that there's a lot that the profession has experienced in my 30 years. And it's definitely a lot that we've experienced coming out of my mother's generation of nursing. And I think they're all great moves. They're all great things that are happening. Um, and I think that the fourth thing that I would add ties back to our conversation today. I think that the mobility of nurses across the United States and internationally um, is is markedly improved over years in the past because we have things like compact licensure and the 32 states that recognize compact licensure and offer compact licensure, which allows nurses to live and be licensed in the state of Florida, but then work in the state of New Jersey, the state of Georgia, the state of, any one of those 32 states. So um, it's a significant improvement in the recognition of our profession. It's a significant improvement in the mobility um, uh, I lost the word there. The mobility of nurses, but also the ability to pull nurses to higher areas of need. Um, we may have a region in the United States that has a much higher need for nurses, and that may be due to, crisis. That may be due to seasonality issues. Nurses are able to make those moves. And there is a class of nurse out there that they're seeing the United States by traveling from state to state, spending time, and they're making a career of using their skills and their certifications and their licensure to also see parts of the world and parts of the United States they might not ever see if they stayed as a staff nurse. And I think that that's a great thing. It's not something that I partook of when I was in my 20s and 30s. I sometimes wish I had. But we have nurses who are professional travel nurses, and that's a wonderful thing, not only for them and their lifestyle, but it's a wonderful thing for the facilities that need them, and that they're willing to come in and support, in that process.
So some very interesting points you make. I think the last one, the ability to go see the world. I remember when we were prepping for our discussion today, you mentioned that you spent most of your career just, just in the Philadelphia area.
Mm-hmm.
So, so yeah, that adds a very different dimension to the role itself. My
Absolutely.
next question is around the hiring of nurses. Right now, you
Mhm.
mentioned nurses are now going for advanced degrees much more, going for professional certifications as well. How has this translated into what recruiters look for when they hire a nurse? And has COVID impacted this in any manner?
So the recruiters are going to be responding to what our clients are looking for. Our clients are going to be spelling out what their needs are based on level of care, where those nurses need to have expertise. Um, they're also then going to spell out what do they expect of the nurses in terms of certifications, in terms of experience. Many facilities, many clients want to see nurses that have a minimum of 2 years experience at the level of care the nurse expects to work at. So if I'm an ICU nurse and I've been a nurse for a couple years working med-surg tele and I just moved to the intensive care unit, 8 months ago, I might be able to go work a med-surg tele contract, but I'm probably not going to be able to place myself as an ICU level nurse because they're going to want to see at least a year, if not 2 years, of that level of care experience from me in my profession. Um, I think that the recruiters are going to, they're going to ask to see, solid resumes. Those resumes are going to have to spell out what have you been doing. If you are an experienced nurse, where have you been? How long were you working there? It's important for many of our clients to have certain background checks run. And so we need to see from a nurse a solid resume that tells me how long you've been in this state and how long you've been in that state and who were you working for in that facility. That's also important. Many nurses will say, well, I worked at X hospital for the last 3 months. You weren't employed by that hospital. You were working for that hospital for GHR. So GHR was your employer, not the hospital. So if we go to run a background check, we call X hospital and X hospital goes, we don't even know who that nurse is because they have no record of their employment. They were there as a contingent labor contract, and GHR was really the employer of the last 3 months. So solid resumes and resumes that are up to date. It can be, I would imagine, painstakingly difficult to keep track of what's going on with your career when you make changes like that. And if you're an experienced travel nurse, and you're traveling to, 3 or 4 different facilities, maybe in a year or 2 years, keeping updates to your resume is something that's going to be important because that's going to be something that the clients are going to want to know, where have you been and what have you done? And then obviously making sure that your certifications are not out of date. And that's simple things like, is your basic life support and your advanced cardiac life support and your pediatric advanced life support certificates up to date? Are they going to expire during your current contract? If I'm getting ready to sign a contract to start on, the 9th of September, I'm going to have trouble selling myself as a travel nurse if my BLS expires at the end of September and I don't have proof that I've got a class scheduled and I'm ready to go. Those type of certifications are must-haves. It's almost equivalent to your nursing license nowadays, with Joint Commission and Department of Health in individual states having oversight. Facilities must know that you're going to remain compliant with those expected with your license and with those expected certifications.
Got it. Picking on a slightly different dimension of hiring, I know there are different types of nurse roles, but are there some common skills that, irrespective of what specific, faculty you may be a nurse in, recruiters, agencies, and healthcare systems assess you for specific skills. If you have to pick some skills, what would those be?
Well, I mean, obviously general nursing care and general knowledge of nursing care of the patient, minimum understanding of anatomy and physiology, those type of things that we would have come out of nursing school having, that we would have had to shown competency in by taking our boards in nursing. Unfortunately, the items that cross over from job to job or from clinical role to clinical role are those basic entry-level nursing practice items where clients and recruiters are going to become more specific is tying back to your skill set and your experience. If I was an emergency room nurse 10 years ago and I clinically practiced as an emergency room nurse, but I've been doing home care for the last 8 years, I'm not going to be somebody who can be placed in the emergency room. My skill set from the ER is not current. It's not up to date. I haven't been in the ER for 8 or 10 years. So I'm not going to be somebody who can say, well, I worked in the ER, so I'll go be a travel nurse in the ER. That's not, it's got to be current level of experience in that level of care that you want to work. And then, of course, certifications that tie back to that level of care, and relevant experience. There's no real, I mean, the basics of nursing is the basics of nursing. what really is going to be important is what is your clinical competency. Can you prove that clinical competency? There'll be exams that you may be asked to take. You will, whether, at the level of care, pharmacology. A lot of facilities now have mixed telemetry units. So do you have a good understanding of basic dysrhythmia and heart conduction interpretation? And can you prove that? Because we don't have a lot of freestanding singular med-surg facilities anymore, or units anymore. They're mixed med-surg telemetry. So I'd like to say there is more than just the basic nursing skill sets. But there isn't really, because then you get into clinical specialties and you have to show competency and recent time worked in those clinical settings.
Got it. I think that's a great point. It happens to all of us. I've been a generalist, right? Or you could say when I started my career, I was someone who could do everything. But as I've become more specialized in what I focus on, my employers, past and present, always look for relevance of my experience, right? Those are, in many ways, very simple concepts, but they do carry over from profession to profession. Same is the case with
Absolutely.
nursing, as you just mentioned.
Yep.
Now, I know we are running a bit short on time, but are there any certifications that you would recommend to nursing candidates today? Especially those who are looking to make a career in travel nursing, and a fast track one at that.
Well, obviously there's the certifications that tie back to their just ability to provide direct patient care. That's the basic life support, the advanced cardiac life support. I would say that many nurses need to be looking at their NIHSS, which is their stroke scale certifications. Many hospitals in the United States are applying for and being garnered Joint Commission certification in stroke care. And many of those facilities tie the idea that all of their nurses are going to be stroke certified. I think that, those are kind of the key certifications that you have to be fluid and functional to be able to go from facility to facility and keep those up to date and keep them in real time. If you have certifications that relate to your specialty, whether that's a CCRN or a CNN or a CEN, Certified Emergency Room Nurse, or you have an OB specialty certification or a NICU certification, those certifications are always good to have. I've always desired to put that type of capstone onto my career and onto the specialty that I've focused in. I am a previously certified nurse. I stopped practicing in that clinical certification, so I could not keep that certification because you have to be practicing. But those are always good things for nurses to consider, how they bolster how they express really their expertise. And that's one of those ways that they can do that is do those advanced certifications related to their clinical specialty.
All right, I think I have space for fitting in one final question.
Sure.
So Peter, as an industry veteran, what would your top 3 tips be for a budding nurse?
For a budding travel nurse or for a budding nurse?
For a budding travel nurse.
For a budding travel nurse. One, I would say be very comfortable with your clinical area of expertise and your clinical area of practice. Understand that while the jobs are there, we are no longer working in COVID, and clients can be a lot more picky about the amount of experience that you have or the amount of experience that they're requesting of nurses. I would say that a novice nurse who has less than 2 years of clinical experience may not fare well as a traveling nurse. You may find jobs. You may have a recruiter who says, "Hey, I've got a client that wants you to come," and you may get that job. Um, the other thing that I would say is you need to be very comfortable with change, and you need to be very comfortable with being adaptable to different circumstances, different clinical practices, different EMR in terms of how you're documenting, uh, different physician ideas. And, in particular, if you're working in a surgical unit, every surgeon has a different way that they want their patients taken care of postoperatively. So you need to be flexible. You need to have some adaptability. Um, if you're feeling at the least bit timid in your current nursing career and you're less than 2 years out of practice, maybe wait another year, get another year under your belt. um, in our profession we talk about novice to expert, and while I don't think you need to be an expert to travel, you definitely don't want to go out and attempt to travel as a novice nurse. You want to make sure that you understand your licensure. One of the things that we in the industry run into a lot is nurses are applying for compact licensure in their home states. They're getting that compact licensure, and then they're able to go and work elsewhere. Nurses are unfortunately forgetting that when they move, they need to notify their primary state where they earned that license, that compact license, or they were given that compact license. They have to notify that state in 60 days. That's the rules of the compact licensure. And we frequently struggle with nurses who are coming to us and say, "Well, I have a Florida compact license." Okay. Well, where do you live? What's your tax home? Where is your driver's license from? Well, it's from Georgia. I, well, I appreciate that Florida and Georgia are, adjacent to each other, but you can't live and claim Georgia as your primary state of residence and work on a Florida compact license. You need to notify Georgia that you've moved and apply for your compact license there. And you need to notify Florida that you're no longer living there. So, I mean, that would be another thing that I think advice wise, please read the rules about your compact licensure and understand it's a great vehicle for you and your profession. It's a great vehicle for our profession in terms of assisting our clients across the nation and placing nurses. But your license is not transferable just because it's a compact license. You have to have proof of residency. Um, and I think the third would be, you know, be prepared to go through every single time you're going to do a new contract. Be prepared to go through a bit of work. You're going to need a background check run. You're probably going to have to do a drug screen of some kind. Your agency and your recruiter is going to collect from you your driver's license, your I-9, all of your employment documentation needs to be filled out. You're going to have to sign releases to run that background check and drug screen. We're going to need you to go and get a physical depending upon when your last physical was done. And so for those travel nurses that are new, um, you may not remember what it was like when you were brought on board to the hospital and you did all those things. But if you're going to be changing contracts and changing clients every 3 months or every 6 months, you have to do those items over and over again. My suggestion, create a file, have that file ready, have a clean copy of your driver's license, front and back, passport, front and back. Um, put those items, your BLS, your ACLS cards with your expiration dates, put those into PDF format and save all of those PDFs in that file on your computer or maybe your phone. You can upload a lot of information to different companies' portals via your phone. They are mobile compatible, but save them as PDF. They're easier transferred as PDF, and keep that ready to go because the more quickly you produce that product, the more quickly your recruiter can get you to work.
excellent points, those. And I've, while I'm not a nurse, I've been at the other end of some of these recruiter requests. So Peter makes some very, 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 very useful and pertinent points. Peter, I have a bonus question, and this one is my special request. You mentioned that, many facilities today look for at least a 2 year, 2 year experience from a travel nurse in the relevant, clinical care facility, right? Or a clinical care specialty. Now, I'm a nurse that has about a year's experience. Right now, of course, I can keep working in that, in that specialty for one more year and get this experience. But is there another way for me to get more experience faster?
Sure. I mean, you can always look for, if there's other hospitals in your area, other systems, you can always look to start per diem jobs. You can always look to pick up roles where, maybe you're just picking up some extra shifts that are outside. It'll show on your resume, it'll show some variability in your experience. It'll show that you've stretched yourself a little bit and some adaptability because you're learning to work in hospital A and hospital B. Even in hospital A, find out if there's not an opportunity for you to work off of your unit or in a like unit in the facility. Find out from your staffing, your nurse manager or for your staffing department, are there needs in another unit that are of like level of care? Um, you know, push yourself to get certifications that you might not need today to do this job, but you want to go and start training and practicing, or you want to move to the next job. You have to, maybe there's certifications that you could get, IV therapy, or, take some advanced arrhythmia classes and learn to do EKG interpretation better. There are always things that you can do in the career that will make you a stronger candidate. Take a critical care course. Many hospitals offer critical care courses. Get that critical care course under your belt. Put that on your resume. Let them, let any employer, not just a travel agency and not just a client that's accepting you from a travel agency, any employer know, hey, as a nurse, I've done a lot to better myself. I've stretched myself by going to work at hospital B, and I didn't spend all my time in this one unit on hospital A. There's a lot of opportunity there to stretch yourself professionally and show that stretch as you fill out your resume and put in those details of the things that you've done, education wise, training wise, certification wise, etc.
Got it. I think that's what I like to call a growth hack, and a
Mm-hmm.
very good one at that. So for our audience, and especially nurses who are interested in becoming travel nurses, this is a great way for you to acquire more experience faster. Now, let me go over to audience questions. Peter, Adam has an interesting one. Given the nature of travel nursing, where you move from one assignment to the next every 3 or 6 months, and you are constantly doing the certification and keeping up your, licenses as you move from, one state to the next.
Mm-hmm.
How does a travel nurse keep a side, remain focused on their professional goals? Right? I am not sure if many nurses have asked you this, but this was something that was, that was floating in my head too. Right? With so much change in your life every 3 or 6 months, how do you remain centered if you're a travel nurse?
Oh, I mean, I'm gonna suggest to Adam and anybody else who has that question, what did you go into nursing for? What are we there for? We're there for the patient. We're there to provide for individuals who are at the lowest point in their life. Whether they've elected to do that, whether they had to elect to do it, whether it's, their body's wearing out or they've done something to their body to wear it out, they, people in the hospital are probably at one of the lowest points in their lives, and they need our care as nurses. So, recentering yourself on the profession, go back to why we are there as nurses, and that's the patient. Um, I would say to that, in terms of how do you keep track of where you are and what you want to do, if you're operating as a travel nurse and you're experiencing different facilities and different policies and different practices and different EMRs and different medical ideas that doctors are throwing out or practicing, you're expanding yourself right there. You're stretching yourself right there. And so to me in my profession, it was my goal was always to expand myself. Like, what more can I learn? What more can I do to improve my clinical practice? And sure, I could stay in the same unit for 10 years and become an expert in that unit, an expert, a senior member of that team, without becoming a nursing leader. I'd just be a 10-year veteran of that unit. Just the fact that you're out and traveling, you're expanding your horizon. How do you circle back? Well, keep a calendar of expiration dates and so on and so forth, reminders so that you don't forget certifications are timing out or expiring. Stay focused in one area. If you really love critical care, get some critical care experience under your belt and then go and do critical care. One of the things that happened for me as a nurse when I was doing my agency work, I was asked by hospitals to go give different units tries, even as an agency nurse. So I, I did emergency room, I did ICU, I did GI lab, I did bronchoscopy lab, I did cath lab. It led to me being asked to do a lot of different things as an agency nurse because I'd get pulled to another unit and I'd say, okay, well, I'm comfortable going and managing X, Y, and Z, but I've not done,
Yeah.
these other items. And they'd say, great, well, we're going to teach you how to do that now that you're here. So I expanded my experience, which to me was part of the focus of my career is how do I grow myself and challenge myself to be doing different things in my nursing career. So that was one of my goals, and I actually obtained it by being an agency nurse.
Terrific point once again. I think, Peter, you're a gold mine of insight. So I think Molly's question I particularly like. Um, she's talking about, I'm a travel nurse. How do I manage finances? Right, especially given that income and expenses can vary state to state.
Yep.
Very, very real life question. I'm not sure
Yep.
you have the time to answer this, but
I,
I'd love it if you can.
Sure, I do. I have time. First of all, I mean, I don't want to be the financial advisor, but Molly, find a budget. Find a budget and learn to live on that budget. And if you're traveling, you are most likely working with a split form of income. You have your taxable income, which is your hourly wages that you're receiving for work rendered. And then you have your tax-free reimbursement or your tax-free MLA, which is your duplicated expenses. So if I keep a home here in the state of Pennsylvania where I live, but I'm going to travel to California as a travel nurse, I'm going to duplicate expenses. I'm going to have expenses that are paying for my apartment or paying for my home in Pennsylvania, and then I have to pay for food, room, and board in California while I work my contract. And in many cases, that is a non-taxed, straight reimbursement that comes to you from your employer. But you need to be making sure that you're documenting you personally for your IRS situation. You need to be documenting your duplication of expenses. You need to keep record of what those expenses were, whether you lived in an Airbnb or you rented a hotel room. what travel you had back and forth. Maybe you go and work 2 weeks and you take a week off, or you do your block schedule and you got a couple days off. You're going to go back to Pennsylvania. Keep record of that travel. Budget's going to be the biggest one. Travel nurses and agency nurses do tend to make a little bit more hourly than staff nurses. And the reason they do is because they expect to be paid, and they should be paid for the flexibility and the readiness that they bring to, hey, I'm a nurse. I'm going to come into your facility. I'm going to help you with your staffing issue. And I'm not employed by you. I'm not receiving your benefits. I don't have your pension or your 401k options. And so I'm going to get paid a little bit more per hour to come in and be that, kind of Johnny on the spot person that needs to help you with your staffing stuff. So a budget's going to be important. Good records, clean records about your duplication, how you've spent the money that is not taxed, how you are saving money that is taxed, and what you're using that taxed income for, and how you're managing those funds. Work with your recruiters. I mean, if there is, there sometimes there's options for, temp to perm. Sometimes there's options for facilities being willing to cover travel. It all depends upon what the client needs and what the client's willing to expend. And I'm not saying that every facility offers travel coverage, but there are some out there that do. And it all depends upon your contract. So I would start with a budget. I would start with an understanding of where you're going. I mean, if you're going to go work in California, your cost of living to work in California for 3 months is going to be much higher than my cost of living here in Pennsylvania. And so, be prepared to, you might be expending more money than you're actually being reimbursed, just because cost of living is difficult to measure, and it's difficult to, some of that may be put into your actual salary, your actual hourly rate. Cost of living may be addressed there by the client and not in your other funds. So budget is going to be the biggest thing. Keeping track of that and keeping track of your expenses, understanding what they are. And you may find, secondarily, there are websites out there, there are resources out there. I can't give them all to you. I've not used them myself, but they exist, where travel nurses have set up budgets and they've set up online programs for you to track your expenses, etc. Talk to your peers in the industry, get on to chat lines, ask them how they're managing their funds. There are mechanisms out there to help you keep track and keep good track of your expenses and set those budgets that you need to set when you're traveling.
All right. With that, audience, we come to the end of our webinar today. I think if you are a travel nurse, I'm sure you've got at least one insight a minute, right? And I can truly say, Peter, this has been one of the most insightful conversations I've had on the healthcare honchos. So on behalf of our audience and Itilite, thank you very much for taking time out and giving us these wonderful insights. Travel
Absolutely.
nurses and recruiters, I hope you've got some very interesting points from our conversation today. And very soon we'll come back to you with a fresh episode of the Healthcare Honchos. Also, don't forget to catch us on YouTube. So we'll be putting up some of the, we'll put up the full recording on YouTube, but also put up some of the shorter clips. Very valuable insights from Peter in the form of YouTube shorts. So do check out our YouTube channel and look us up. Thank you. Thank you once again. You've been a wonderful and patient audience. Have a great rest of the day.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Peter. Thank you, everyone.